Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. I hope everybody has had a great Thursday so far. Today, we are going to be covering a lot of different things from around the world of sports. We're going to start off in the NFL, talking all about the recent transactions that took place, including a brand new signing with the Atlanta Falcons and star cornerback A.J. Terrell, as well as a trade taking place between division rivals, the Eagles and the Commanders. We'll get into all of that in just a second. Later on in the show, we're going to move on to some baseball, talk about the historic pace that Aaron Judge is on, if he can even be better than how he was in his MVP 2022 record-setting campaign with his home run numbers, his slugging numbers, and everything he has done this season. Then we'll continue our preview series for both college football and the NFL, starting off with the Big 12 in college football, the fourth of the four Power Four conferences. Today, taking a look at their contenders, a dark horse in there, and what I expect to happen as we gear up for Week 0 of the college football season starting on Saturday. If you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat option. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. But like I was saying, in today's episode, we are going to start off with some updates from around the world of the NFL, starting off with a massive contract extension given out to Falcons star cornerback A.J. Terrell. It feels like we've been talking about this Falcons defense a lot lately. They have been busy. They continue to add to it, and this is a cornerstone of a defensive unit. Obviously, earlier last week, they traded for star pass rusher Matthew Judon, one of the top 5 pass rushers in the league when he was healthy the last couple of seasons. They also brought in star safety Justin Simmons to pair next to Jesse Bates. That's a scary safety duo now that they have back there. And now they've done good by their star corner, A.J. Terrell. A.J. Terrell, who has been one of the best cover corners in all of football, barely getting targeted, being targeted less than 100 times in each of the last 3 seasons, never giving up more than 6 touchdowns in a season. He has been incredible since entering the league, and he deserves to get paid. He got paid 4 years, $81 million, being the second highest paid cornerback in the history of football, only trailing behind elite corner of Green Bay, Jair Alexander, someone else who also is up there in conversation for one of the best corners of all time. Offline. Excuse me, though. Be right back here. You good? All right. As they continue to build towards the future here, this is a Falcons team that wants to have a long Super Bowl window open, which is, part of what they're doing. They're bringing in young talent like Michael Penix. They're continuing to, with their win now mode, bringing in older talent like Matthew Judon, like Justin Simmons, extending the guys that are going to be important for them as they continue to try and be this competitive team, make it back to the Super Bowl for the first time since 2018. So this is huge for the Falcons. Congratulations to them. The other major piece of news coming out of the NFL here today has to do with the Washington Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles. A trade between these two division rivals as the Washington Commanders are sending 2022 first-round pick Jahan Dotson over to the Eagles with a fifth-round pick in exchange for a third-round pick in next year's draft, as well as two seventh-round picks. And for a lot of people, this was a head-scratching move, right? This is a move that you look at the Commanders roster and you say, okay, they have a rookie quarterback. They have Terry McLaurin. Who else do they have after that? But there's been a lot of rumblings around Washington's training camp for a while now that Jahan Dotson might not even make the roster. And that is crazy for a guy that in 2022, obviously, was drafted in the first round, has been relatively productive in his career. It's not the most productive guy out there, but he's a guy that's been able to put meaningful yards and meaningful stats out there in the NFL in his young career. He gets traded for a loss, obviously, if you're looking at it like that. But the question wasn't, is he going to be the wide receiver 2 in Washington? The question was he going to make the team? And you look at Washington rosters and you say, hey, who is going to be in there behind him? Who is going to be the receiver that's going to take that spot? And you have guys like De'Ami Brown, who has been the guy in preseason that the Commanders and Jaden Daniels specifically has been relying on outside of Terry McLaurin. You also have the rookie that they bring in, Luke McCaffrey, the rookie that they draft here in Washington. So there was a real question of whether or not he was even going to make the roster here. So it doesn't make sense it doesn't make a lot of sense for the Commanders at first. But when you go and dig a little deeper, they got some return on a guy that it sounds like was not going to make the starting roster. As far as the Eagles go, they go and get that third receiver. Obviously, we know they have one of the strongest receiving duos in the league when it comes to A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. But these two guys alone, we've seen them try to find a wide receiver for a while. They had Jalen Reagor. They've gone through Nelson Aguilar. They've gone through guys like they brought in Julio Jones last season trying to find a wide receiver 3. And we have seen in the past, again, Jahan Dotson is a guy that has been able to carry workload, be a wide receiver 2 on a team when you really need him to. And putting him at wide receiver 3, I think is huge for the Eagles. If I'm looking at this trade, I think this is probably about a win-win, especially if the reports coming out of Commanders camp can be trusted here that Jahan Dotson was in danger of not making the team. They got some value for him. A third-round pick is good value for a guy that hasn't lived up to expectations as a first-round wide receiver. When he was drafted, he was a little of a reach anyway, but he's a guy that has shown ability to be an important part of a football team in some situations. So I don't mind the trade for either side. If Washington was ready to move on, they were ready to move on, at least swept in, and Washington was able to get some value from a guy that they should have been able to get some value from. Third. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just went over a bunch of major news coming out of the NFL earlier today, including A.J. Terrell getting a massive 4-year, $81 million contract, making him the second highest paid cornerback in the history of the NFL, as well as the Commanders trading wide receiver Jahan Dotson to the Eagles. In this segment here, we're going to move on to the world of baseball, talk a little bit about Aaron Judge and the pace that he has been on. Another electric season for him, his second straight healthy season where he's challenging for that AL home run record. We'll talk about what else he's been doing in this historic run of his and much more in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, all you need to do is throw that in the chat, throw that in the comments. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. Appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. But actually, before we get into the Aaron Judge stuff, we do have some breaking news. Breaking news, the Mariners have fired manager Scott Servais. That is crazy to me. The Mariners, who have been in a bit of a slide basically since June. They were up 10 games on the Astros in June. Now they're back 5 games. They have officially fired their manager. It's an incredible fall off. At this point, the Mariners season, I think they've officially thrown in the towel. And it's kind of crazy because if you look at that roster, especially the starting pitching on the Mariners roster is one of, if not the best in baseball. We talked a little bit about it yesterday, but the manager has just been fired. The second one of the MLB season, as the White Sox also fired their manager. It's an interesting look. Again, they needed to get some offense. They needed to fix the bullpen, and they did their best. But for now, we're going to return our focus to Aaron Judge and what he has been doing this MLB season. Aaron Judge has once again taken the league by storm. He is 32 years old. In his age 32 season, he once again is challenging for the record that he set just 2 years ago, winning his first MVP, breaking the AL record for home runs, hitting 62 in the season. He right now is on pace for 61. He hit his 48th home run last night, league leading, of course. He, if you look at all of his numbers, has been incredible. When we take a look at what Aaron Judge has been able to do, through 127 games in his MVP season, he was at 49 home runs. Now, this was a Jeff Passan tweet that he for today's game. This was through 127 games, comparing them in both 2022 and 2024. He has a triple slash line in 2022 of 295, 396, and 661, hitting 49 home runs and 109 RBIs. Now, when we look at the 120 games, again, he hit his 48th home run yesterday, but through 127 games before yesterday, he was hitting 334. 4 was in the middle of his home run race. This is a crazy stretch for him, and he's really cemented himself as the best pure hitter in baseball. That's not to take away from what he does in the field, but what's even crazier is he's not even a lock to win MVP this season. There's a guy in Kansas City named Bobby Witt who, outside of Aaron Judge, should be running away with the MVP. It's crazy that one of these two is not going to win it, and it seems like Aaron Judge is going to do it. Right now, he's on pace for, like I said, 61 home runs, something that he could very easily outpace himself, go ahead and break his record again. Breaking that record twice in 2 straight healthy seasons is insane. We haven't seen this kind of power out of anyone in the modern era, and this consistency. The fact that he now has this season Juan Soto protecting him, or him protecting Juan Soto, is ridiculous. And we look at where the Yankees are. They went on that slide in the middle of the season as well. This wasn't a very this wasn't a great lineup outside of them, and he's still getting pitched to. He's still being able to have these elite power numbers, these elite numbers that, again, we haven't seen comparing to some of the greats of the history of baseball. It is insane to see what he has been able to do this season. When we're looking at that home run record for the second healthy year in a row, I think if anyone's going to be able to do it, it's going to be him. But we'll see what happens. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to take a look at college football, talk a little bit about the Big 12, the fourth of our four power conferences that we're going to take a look at because the season starts on Saturday. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube, absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the breaking news in baseball. The Mariners have fired their manager, Scott Servais, after a crazy decline. We'll see if they can bounce back from that, if that's what that offense needed to finally wake up. We also talked about Aaron Judge in the last segment, as he is once again on the drive towards history, attempting to re-break the record that he set just 2 years ago, the AL home run record, and he is right on pace for that currently with 61 home runs, and the rest of his numbers are insane as well as a couple of other major breaking news from the world of football that happened today. We talked about AJ Terrell signing a 4-year, $81 million contract, and Jahan Dotson getting traded from the Commanders to the Eagles. In this segment here, we're going to turn our attention to the world of college football as we are just days away from kickoff on that season. Kicks off on Saturday. We are at the end of our Power 4 conference preview today, hitting the fourth of all 4 power conferences, talking about the Big 12. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat option. Throw stuff in the chat. If you do either of those things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw it in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the college football preview, the final of our Big 4 conferences, the Big 12. We talked a little bit about the disparity between the top 2 Big 4 conferences and the bottom 2 Power 4 conferences yesterday when we were talking about the ACC, and a lot of that applies to the Big 12 as well. Now, they had a much quieter offseason when compared to the ACC, the Big 10, and the SEC, but they still had a pretty big offseason. Obviously, with conference realignment, they have a bunch of new teams joining them, including Arizona State, Arizona, BYU, not BYU there, Arizona State, Arizona, Colorado, and a few others joining the Big 12. They get a lot of big names. Currently, in the top 25 of that AP preseason polls, they have 5 teams ranked in there. The highest ranked one is the Utah Utes, led by quarterback Cam Rising. He feels like he's been in college football for about 50 years at this point. He is the oldest starting quarterback in all of college football, and he was injured for most of last season. We'll see if he can be healthy and lead the Utah Utes to a championship here, as they always have a solid defense. Ranked right behind them, as they're at 12, the next highest ranked team is the Oklahoma State Cowboys. They are led by running back Ollie Gordon, who's getting some Heisman consideration out there in Oklahoma. They've had a little bit of an interesting offseason over there with some off-the-field issues plaguing that program, but this is a very, very good team in Oklahoma State. At 18, Kansas State. They lost their quarterback to the transfer portal, but they are still going to be a problem, that Kansas State team. And at 2021, we have Arizona. Arizona is a dark horse team in this conference. There's a bunch of other teams ahead of them, including those 3 that I said beforehand. But Arizona was one of the highest flying offenses at the end of last season. They returned their quarterback, Noah Fifita. He's a guy that I would keep a Heisman watch on. He's one of those guys that could grab this award when there isn't a true front runner right now. And the final of the teams that are in the top 25 are the Kansas Jayhawks, not necessarily known for being a football school, but recently they've gotten bigger and better. Their recruiting has gotten a lot better recently, and they finally cracked the preseason top 25 this year. Look for them to make some noise. Obviously, outside of the top 25 in this conference, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Colorado Buffaloes, led by Coach Prime over there. Obviously, they have a very publicized offseason. Everything that they do is always in the public eye. Shadur Sanders is one of the top quarterbacks in this class. I don't think Colorado is a team that's going to be super successful, but look for them to make a bowl game, something that they weren't able to do last year. I think they made some improvements, especially to the offensive line, which was one of the biggest reasons that they ended up falling off of a cliff after the first couple of games of last year. But this is a team that's going to be exciting, going to be in the headlines. This is going to be a fun conference, right? Again, they're relegated back to that second tier. And we talk about this new 12-team playoff. Obviously, Utah is the favorite to win this conference, but there's a lot of other teams here that I think could take them out. I think this is the conference that's the least clear as far as who's going to win it. We talk about Utah. Obviously, the first conversation goes to the quarterback, Cam Rising. He's a guy that, if he's healthy, he has all the talent in the world, but he has not been able to stay on the field. And that defense, for as good as it is, has not been able to keep the Utah Utes, afloat on everything in these conferences in the past, always getting taken out by a stronger opponent near the end of the season. And we'll see if their tides can change now that they're in the Big 12. Their biggest competition probably comes from Oklahoma State or Kansas State, but I want to shout out the Arizona Wildcats. I think Arizona's the team that I think will give them the most fits. Again, we talk about that offense. Noah Fifita is a guy that I think could be a Heisman front runner. There's a lot of guys in this conference that could be Heisman front runners, but I think that Arizona offense and their much improved defense, we saw what they did down the stretch of last year, and they returned a lot of their guys. Not too much craziness going on for them. I think they're the team that I'm going to pick to win this conference. Again, most people say it's going to be Utah. I do think that Utah will make the championship game. Again, that defense is nothing to mess with. I'm just a little concerned about Cam Rising's health and if he can be the same guy that we knew before his injuries, right? He hasn't played in nearly 2 years at this point, and I don't know if he's going to be rusty. Time off generally does not help a quarterback. We see stuff like this happen in the NFL with guys like Le'Veon Bell, who took a year off, guys like Deshaun Watson, who took 2 years off. They never came back the same. So I'm a little concerned about their offense, but their defense can absolutely keep them afloat in a relatively stingy, tough conference here. But we'll see what's going to happen. I do think that in the 12-team playoff, we did our little breakdown. The SEC and the Big Ten probably combined to get 7 spots plus the 1 spot for the group of 5. We'll give 2 to the ACC. That leaves 2 for this conference as well. We're obviously going to take our conference champion. So for me, that's Arizona. And we're going to give that other spot to Utah. Again, I think they'll be in that conference game. I think if you make the conference finals in a power conference, you are basically guaranteed, but we don't know how the committee is going to grade these teams. We don't know how much SEC or Big Ten bias is going to go into it and how that's going to affect conferences like the Big 12, conferences like the ACC. That's going to be the biggest thing to watch. We know that they have waning power when we're talking about these power conferences, but how much power do they actually have left? Do they have that guaranteed 2 spots, or will a lower ranked SEC team go and take out the loser of this conference championship? And maybe at that point we see the end of conference championships games, because what if you're in a position to win or to make the college football playoff, you lose your conference championship game, and then a team that doesn't play in the conference championship game comes in and take your spot? So I think there's a lot of wide-ranging effects for what happens this season. Obviously, this is a new era of college football beginning this season, so I'm very excited to see what happens around not just the Big 12, but the entirety of the sport. We're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to finish off our show talking about the NFL. Today, we'll be focusing on the Ravens, and we just have 3 teams left before we finish our entire preview of every single NFL team. We'll talk about everything they did this offseason, give them a draft grade and an overall grade, see if they improved or got worse. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the Big 12, did a little bit of a conference preview for that as the college football season is right around the corner. We also talked about some breaking news in baseball and Aaron Judge with the Mariners firing their manager. Scott Surveys officially off of the job as they look to take a quick rebound and save their season. We also talked about a couple big news coming out of the NFL with A.J. Terrell signing a massive contract, making him the second highest paid corner in the history of the game, and Jahan Dotson being traded to the Eagles. In this segment here, we're going to turn our attention back to the NFL, talk a little bit about the Baltimore Ravens today. Talking about everything that they did this offseason and giving them an overall grade. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat option. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. But like I was saying, today I'm going to continue our preview series of the NFL. Just 3 teams left today talking about the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore